Oh, we don't really got that. Yeah, it looks weird. The last time we showed it to us is already like, okay, yeah, my stuff was and I submitted it, and now all of that. What is that? Mine is very simple. I thought it was simple, but I looked at the other ones. It is very
Here we go. Not just yet. Why not? Make you bigger. Yep. Sorry? You submitted an image of the underpainting, yes. Okay. 11. 0328. 0328.
Do you have a plan?
The underpainting is due the 18th? Well, ideally it's due today.
Let's do the 18th.
Does it due the 18th?
It's supposed to be due today, but then the finishing is due at Friday.
Oh, because on the parts space only says the underpainting.
Anyway, but I said in class, clearly, underpainting ideally done today, so I can start talking about the color layers. So, okay, so
But I think I can get it done today. Like today night.
yep,
It just says underpainting. What do we do next? I'm like,
that's what I'm going to talk about today. As soon as people start asking me questions, I'm going to get to it. Okay, pull this back. Come on, tape. Do your stuff. A little.
Look at your painting. No, because if you go to setting, then you search inverter, settings where.
I changed you, not. I didn't do invert because invert's going to make my darks turn light and my lights turn dark. I just altered it using hue in Photoshop. Okay. Okay, I think my camera's set up.
I messed up a bit, but that's okay because we divided.
Okay, that's not bad. Oops. Oh, don't move. Okay. Okay, so let's talk about the color layers for your paintings today. So we are going to again employ 3 different techniques. I've already started using them with the other class on mine. So this layer at the top, right here, this is my burnt umber layer. So I already laid down 1 thin coat of red, and I need to build this up more if I'm going to make this thing look like my reference image that you see on the screen on the left. So I'm going to add more layers of red to this to begin to gradually build up that red color. This is one of the reasons that Renaissance paintings have those sort of jewel tone colors, is because they're putting on thin glazes of oil with the color in it. So it begins to build up. So what ends up happening is it gives like a stained glass effect because light bounces through all those color layers and then hits the white of the canvas underneath and then bounces back out. That's where you get those sort of jewel tones for those Renaissance style paintings. That's where that comes from. So I have quite a bit of work to do to begin to lighten this up. I will use some white on this, but only at the very end, just to pop in highlights. I'm not mixing any white into the paints I'm going to be using. So I'm just using, I can mix my red with a blue or purple to darken it, or a green, whatever you want. I can darken it, but I'm not adding in any whites. Okay, so basically, my liquid I'm using is a little bit different than yours. Because I started painting this at home, I didn't have any of the, you have the liquid original that you're using. This one, as you can see, is more watery. This is called Liquid Light. So this is another product sold by Grumbacher, which is the same company that makes Liquid Light. So it's a bit more fluid than we're using, but it still adds, it'll add some shyness to build it up to make my painting get kind of glossy, but it's also going to dry my time up as well. So for example, this section right here I painted this morning, thin layer, and it's completely dry. There's no paint coming off on my fingers. Okay, so I can work on top of that. So again, I'm going to go in with some more red. I need my red to be a little bit more orangey, so I'm going to put some more yellow in my red this time. And again, I can't add any white to this to lighten it up. And I'm just going to, again, keep working here and begin to build up these layers and trying to minimize my brush strokes as much as possible. I'm going to hit my cam. There we go. And some yellow. So I'm just going to sort of build up my layers. And I'm just going to spread this layer again nice and thin. It might take me 4 or 5 coats to actually get it to where the color has the density that I want, and that's perfectly fine. And again, I'm sort of laying in the color. I like to use my older scrubby brushes. I tend to be a somewhat scrubby painter, if that makes sense. I tend to like do this a lot. So old dried out brushes are good because the bristles are nice and stiff. I don't want to use like a good brush that has like nice soft bristles for this, the way that I paint. But you might paint differently than I do, right? So I'm going to try and blend this out. And if I want to speed up this process, I could also use, oops, where did I put it? There we go. Oh, I didn't wash it. Okay. This is called a fan brush. So basically the name is because it looks like a fan. This can also be used to, again, soften up the brush strokes in those layers if I want those to disappear, if I don't want to have any texture. So this is in my kit. If you want to borrow it, just let me know. You just got to wash it when you're done. So that section's got 2 coats. Can you see a difference between the 2 coats and the 1 coat? I think you can. Oops, sorry. So this is my 2 coat side. This is my 1 coat side. Okay. So on the next layer, which I've underpainted in green, and again, on my reference, I've got some pretty intense reds going on. So I'm going to choose a softer brush for this. Okay, so with this layer, I can use a mix. Okay, so for this layer, I can use a mix of techniques. For some areas, I might choose to do glazing. Historically, a lot of artists would have used glazing in the shadows. So the shadows have sort of more depth to them, and then use more opaque paint in the lighter areas of the painting. And that way it also, kind of like how a dime or like a coin has thickness to it. You understand? Even though the thickness is very subtle, it shows like a really sort of three-dimensional quality to it. Same can sort of happen here by using thicker layers in the highlights and those very thin gloss layers in the shadows. Artists can sort of achieve that same sort of subtle effect that's going on. So the highlight layers can actually pop out more literally than the shadow layers do. Okay, so I'm going to continue with my sort of background here. So again, I want the sort of orangey red. I'm not really close to it yet. That's going to get another layer. And again, this time I want my paint to be thicker. So I'm not putting in as much liquid. So it's not going to be as transparent. I'm looking at my reference and trying to make it more orangey. Still a little bit on the thin side. Hello, Ms. Fuoco. No one wanted to buy your car keys. I tried. So I'm just going to continue to work on this, beginning to build up those layers. Again, my paint is still kind of on the thin side. Add a little bit more paint to it. That's better. And again, I can lay my various tones side by side. So if I want this next layer to get darker, I'm going to switch to the deeper red. I'm still going to put some yellow in it to make it more orange, and a little bit of liquid. And it's a little bit deeper than the other. It's also a little bit more opaque, which is nice. And again, I can then begin to sort of blend in those edges. So I'm trying to sort of blend shadows, midtones, and highlights. I tend to want to put the paint side by side and then blend the edges to make those transitions, as opposed to adding in a color and then simply adding more and more and more on top of it to mix it in to lighten it up. Does that make sense? Because then you end up with something that's kind of mucky. You end up with too much paint on your canvas at once to deal with. So sort of putting your colors side by side like in a jigsaw puzzle and then blurring the lines between those patches of color can be much more effective. Okay, so if I want to darken this up some more, maybe I'll throw a little bit of blue in here into my red. Again, I'm going to sort of lay it beside. And I can grab a cleaner brush and begin to blend those edges to make those transitions more seamless. So if I was trying to darken up this patch of red, I wouldn't paint this red all the way down here and start adding a dark color to it. I would try and put the dark color beside it and then blend them together at the edges. That would be my goal. Okay, so third layer is the more fun layer for me. So with this one, we're using more of an impressionist technique. So I want another brush. So with this one, what I'm trying to do is take advantage of the fact that there can be a really great play between complementary colors when you're painting. So now I'm going to go back to my original color. So I'm going to put that orangey red on top of this blue in this bottom third of my painting. And on this part, that's sort of this sort of greeny color. That's become more of like a purpley tone in my actual reference. It's quite dark. So, but again, with this one, what I want to do is I want to keep my paint a bit thicker. So I'm going to use less liquid in this layer. And let me plunk in some color here, mix some up. I want it to be fairly thick. I'm going to lighten this up. Throw in a little bit of white here. And with this one, what I want to do is sort of lay in definite strokes. My paint can be thicker. It can be a bit more impasto. Lay down a couple of strokes. grab some more paint, maybe vary the color a little bit. And don't overwork it. Let those strokes show up in the work that you're doing. And I still want to have some of that blue layer sort of peeking through. And let me see if I can find you an example here. Hold on. Can I find it? Kunst Matrix.